now for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning. From the front pages of the newspapers, let's bring in a RISE analyst, my favorite, Dr. Constance Ikoku. Good morning, Dr. Constance. How are you today?
Good morning, Vimba, and my favorite too.
Oh, radiant.
No.
Colors you keep bringing. Serve us early in the morning.
Very stunning.
I don't want to get any flack. I don't have any favorite. Everybody is my favorite. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Dr. Constance.
No, me with my whole chest, I'll say you are my favorites.
Okay. Good morning, Adesua. Good morning, Yolanda and Gwenga. And Gwenga, this morning, you're totally outnumbered 4-1.
Yes.
How do you
so
feel
I think
about
the
that?
men should start seeking for male affirmative action on the show too.
All right, yeah, we'll have that. I hope you're managing or you cook very well.
Well, it's always inspiring being amidst lovely ladies. I get so sentimental at this kind of situation.
All right, we are lovely indeed. Okay, hello there and welcome to the program. We'll begin with This Day newspaper. In This Day today, the top story captures the political moves, alignments and deals that are being made ahead of 2027. Here, the Buhari organization backs Tinubu, declares loyalty. We note that this organization eventually morphed into the Congress for Progressive Change, CPC, that merged with other parties to produce the ruling All Progressives Congress. The pledge to support the president was led by Tanko Almakura, who is the governor of Nasarawa State. And let's pull up the Guardian newspaper with the same story, but a bit of a different angle. There it says, battle for Buhari's 12.7 million ballots. Tinubu Palace CPC group says revenue targets met amid data gaps. Here it says the president met with the CPC, that is a faction of that group led by Tanko Almakura. And in this meeting, Speaker Tajuddin Abbas was among those that were devoted, or that is devoted to the president ahead of 2027. Vimbai, obviously the dynamics have changed, and this so-called 12 million votes or 12.7 million votes is up for grabs. I mean, the president and every other presidential candidate will have to fight hard for those votes and more.
Absolutely, Dr. Constance. We saw sort of the scampering for these 12 million votes, or alleged 12 million votes, just from even the moment of the burial of the late President Buhari, and we saw the politicking that was taking place there and some of the conversations that came out of it. But to rewind back to, the times prior to his demise, we saw that there had been chatter about the fact that some CPC members were feeling disenfranchised. They were feeling forgotten. They felt like this administration had not given them the right appointments and had not given them enough of equity in this particular government. They did a lot to downplay it. They did a lot to dismiss it. However, we continued to see that, and which reached a crescendo at the funeral of late President Buhari. So what followed then was discourse and debate about what would happen to the former president's votes, or his base, so to speak. Well, this puts that to bed, but I think some of the conversations we need to have really are around whether that 12 million votes even exists to begin with in this day and age, because if you look at how our voter participation, apathy has increased drastically since the 2019 election, for example. In the last election, we saw the slim margins that led to the victory of President Bola Tinubu from the north. Atiku had a big outing there, but it didn't add up to 12 million. So there's that conversation to be had. However, all of these chips are aligning in the road to 2027. Now, very quickly, I'll touch on the president's affirmation or declaration, rather.
Can we hold that thought,
we will not need to borrow.
Vimbai, can we hold that thought? Because
okay, we'll pick that up later.
Yeah,
sure.
We will be discussing it extensively in another paper. But let's stay on this topic. I want to bring you in Adesua. So, like I said, there's a lot that is going to be happening ahead of 2027. There's a lot of alignments and realignment. And some say that the president will find it not too difficult because he's already an incumbent. If he was able to clinch the APC ticket in difficult circumstances the last time and won the election, although others have disputed that he won the elections. This time around, he is the president. He has all the apparatus of power, all the agencies and institutions under him. So what makes a difference? Who says that he will, not ride easily to the victory in 2027? Your thoughts on that?
Well, the lay of the land is definitely very different from it was in 2023. Even within the PDP, when you had the G5 governors, now you have Makinde calling certain people satanic infiltrations into the PDP, whereas they stood together against Atiku in 2023. And within the APC is it's an umbrella of strange bedfellows, right? It is a coalition party. And a lot of the pushback you're getting from politicians are from northern CPC members. So although they're coming out to say that there is no faction, that all is fine and good, that Buhari's movement is behind Tinubu, that'll be very hard to do. And we have seen in Nigeria, particularly as we saw in the 2023 elections, that sometimes politicians can promise support or promise their supporters, but down the line, they're not able to deliver, right? Even, we saw it with the Labour Party movement. We've seen it in different instances where politicians say, my people are behind me, and they look behind me and no one is there. The PDP couldn't carry certain states, and the same thing goes for the APC. In a free and fair election, it's definitely going to be tough for President Tinubu because particularly he has become highly unpopular in the north. Can the northern CPC faction even rally their supporters to back him? I don't even know if they can rally their supporters to back themselves. Ultimately, these are people who have been out of the game for a while. They are ex-governors or ex-ministers or, ex-appointees. These are not people mostly with skin in the game, except for the Speaker of the House of Assembly, of course, Honorable Tajuddin Abbas. But even he is facing problems in the Green Chamber.
All right, the word is free and fair. Will we have a free and fair election in 2027? Okay, let's look at another story in this day. Here, the piece on the beleaguered People's Democratic Party, which seems to be picking itself up, by the way. A caption here says, Wike's team moves to wreck PDP convention, list conditions, governors threaten showdown. Let's then pair that with New Telegraph newspaper. There it says, nobody can stop our convention. PDP replies Wike, loyalists, warns against destructive voices, will no longer allow anybody to take us for granted, according to Mohammed. So this is the PDP countering Minister Nyesom Wike of the Federal Capital Territory, who has severally spoken out against the upcoming national convention scheduled for November 15 in Oyo State. The chairman of the PDP Governors Forum, Bala Mohammed, was quoted as saying that it is time to flex muscles. It has to stop. Enough is enough. We are not going to tolerate any longer. We are not cowards. We are not afraid of anybody. We are capable of navigating this party beyond shenanigans. Tough talk right there, Benga. And at this point, the PDP does need that leadership that will be firm.
Now, it looks like the battle for the soul of the PDP ahead of the National Convention, which comes clearly under threat. We can see the Wike faction making a 6 strong demands, among which is a reorganization of the reconduction of the Anambra and Ebonyi Congress according to the court as claimed by Wike, and also retaining the national chairmanship position in the North Central. And we know that the national chairman that the last 102nd NEC had endorsed was from the Northeast. So when you look at all this, and also the zoning confinement that was being demanded, and they'll call for the Ekiti Local Government Congress and many other demands like that, and calling for the readoption of the South-South Zonal Congress that saw Dan Obi as the national vice chairman South-South, instead of having the other one, Ogidi, as the chairman South-South caretaker committee. So when you look at all this, it seems that that demand seemed like a potential deal breaker for the PDP National Working Committee, and especially a direct affront to the national chairman of the PDP, Ambassador Umar Damagun, it's just a backdoor way of saying he's calling for the sack of Damagun. So the people are gathering together, and we are likely to see a showdown between Seyi Makinde, the governor of Oyo State, and Wike. So let's keep our fingers crossed to see what lies ahead of the November 15th National Convention.
All right, let's move to Daily Independent newspaper. This morning, Nigeria's mid-tier banks under pressure as 2026 deadline nears. The story here is that while Tier 1 banks are doing well with the recapitalization drive, the Tier 2 banks are not so well positioned, and we may just see a new wave of mergers and acquisitions. Let's refresh your memory on the requirements. In 2024, the Central Bank of Nigeria directed banks to raise minimum capital to 500 billion naira, 200 billion, and 50 billion naira for international, national, and regional banks. Well, without a robust banking sector, it's impossible for these banks to compete in global markets. So recapitalization gives these institutions the needed buffers to remain stable. So it means that if the Tier 2 banks have to merge, then that's what needs to happen, Yolanda. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, just as you've rightly said, Dr. Constance, Nigeria's central bank has set new higher requirements. And so now this push will likely lead to fewer banks. And I think next year we will see a lot of differences in our banking space. Just as you have rightly mentioned, we're going to see a lot of mergers, and this is going to be very crucial in Nigeria's banking sector. So I look forward to seeing that. I think the deadline that was given was for March of 2026. So I believe that that's something that we need to look forward to and just see which banks start to merger. I think there were a few banks that were, trying to sell their shares, selling parts of their businesses to meet these new rules. For example, FCMB is raising nearly 400 billion naira in phases, and same with Fidelity Bank as well, and Sterling and many other banks. So we look forward to see what happens by March of next year.
Definitely, to achieve that trillion, this is a $1 trillion economy target that the president has. You need to have a very strong, formidable banking sector. Absolutely. So we'll see how that plays out by the time the deadline was out. So let's see Daily Trust. There, Tinubu sets aside NTA appointments, recalls DG, ED News. The president directed the reinstatement of the DG of the Nigerian Television Authority, Mr. Salihu Dembos. The director of news, Mr. Ayo Adeniyi, was also recalled. Only recently, Rotimi Pedro was appointed as new DG. Stella Dean Jacob, executive director, Karima Bello, executive director, among others. Vimbai, very awkward appointments and reversals. We've seen this before in this government, appointments and then reverses. It just indicates a lack of coordination and weak decision-making processes. But there's also the issue of political interference and power struggles that go behind the headlines, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's clear that the impact of lobbying in this particular administration is heavier than we've seen in the past, because often, of course, we know what happens behind the scenes before these appointments are made. But these issues are normally resolved before going to press, if I may use that term. Yeah. But there have been almost 7 or 8 incidents so far, from NDDC to various boards. I believe NDLA and NAFDAC at some point, all the boards were dissolved, and then they came back to say, no, we meant all boards except for NDLA and NAFDAC. There was the issue concerning Mariam Shetty. If you remember, she went for the ministerial screening, and as she got to the assembly for the screening, she found that her name had been removed from the list. So this shows you that there's a lot happening behind the scenes. Now, this is unfortunate because, again, we continue to say that we're interested in governance. We're interested in seeing the execution of policy, service delivery, the performance of policy. But when you have so many moving pieces and people simply can't even agree on appointees, I know a lot of people had celebrated the appointment of Rotimi Pedro, somebody who was said to have been, would be very visionary for the NTA. I also have an understanding that the vision for NTA is very robust and very progressive. But, you know, when we're now seeing all of these sort of teething issues before takeoff, it does create a little bit of discontent. So I hope that the presidency and the administrative side can get their house in order. But I'm glad we've also evolved from the time when we saw different spokespeople deleting each other's releases and so forth. So we've come a long way, but still a lot of work to be done with regards to just having unity, one voice, and making sure a decision is a decision before it's brought to the public. Goes a long way in building integrity and public trust.
Yeah, poor appointees. I mean, so many people have congratulated them, and I hear some have even moved to Abuja to get ready for their positions. But then, you know, what do they do? Do they fall back to the the last position? I don't know. Very complicated issues. Let's see a Vanguard newspaper. We've met our revenue target, no longer borrowing from domestic markets or banks, according to President Tinubu. The president boasted that his government has been focused on prudent management of resources and not debt, and that what the country needs now is to build infrastructure for export and import, which will create jobs. Also, this revenue target was met from non-oil sector, says this report. I had to read this report again to truly understand what the president was saying, because this information is a bit startling in light of the fact that there have been quite a number of borrowings to fund the budget. So I think what's being said here is that the revenue target is enough to fund all financial obligations, but whatever the mark was, you know, that was given has been achieved. So, I mean, there are gaps on the information here. Adesuwa, if you want to come in here, there are gaps, and I think we need more information made available.
You know what? I think we need more information available, but this reminds me of something very important. In July of this year, when the president came to National Assembly, one of the members of the House of Representatives prayed for him, and he prayed that the sycophants around him will not lead him astray. And I can only imagine that maybe the president has been led astray, because not only did he say this, but he also said that we have defeated poverty in Nigeria. And I think it's so removed from the reality. Yes, he did come to us. The House, on 23rd of July, was the last approval for borrowing. Perhaps we're not approving from domestic banks, but we're approving in dollars, in euro, in yen. We are borrowing money. Nigeria is highly indebted. I know Vimbai wanted to speak about this earlier, so I'll be very brief. But I don't know if it's that the president is misleading or if he is being misled. But now the prayer that was prayed over his head in the Green Chamber is resonating for me, because I don't understand how the president of Nigeria would stand and say that, one, we've hit all our targets, we're not borrowing, and two, we've defeated poverty.
Okay, so let me just jump in very quickly, just to shed a little bit more light with regards to context. So if you look at the different publications have run with the story in different ways. Some are referring to domestic borrowing, and then I believe it's Daily Trust, I stand to be corrected, that has gone into the detail of saying domestic borrowing from local banks. So, you know, the context here is that the president is saying that Nigeria will no longer need to borrow from local banks. However, we already know that as far as domestic borrowing is concerned, we've already borrowed about 2.5 trillion from the bond markets, with a target of taking about 13 trillion more from the bond markets. There are also sukuk bonds, which are domestic ways of borrowing. So I think that context is also very important. Now, when we look at hitting our targets with regards to revenue, I think it's an important talking point, because we know that we're running two concurrent budgets with an extension on the 2024 budget, meaning that even if we have hit our targets for the 2025 budget, we're still using that to fund 2024. We don't even have a budget performance report on 2024 because, of course, the budget is ongoing. Traditionally, we do about 70% budget performance here in Nigeria. However, the budget office of the Federation has not released a budget implementation report since the second quarter of 2024. Okay. This is because they say there's so many changes, so many extensions and additions and and so forth. So it's very difficult for us to have a true picture of the fiscal at the moment. Of course, the president would have more privileged information than we do, but based off of what is on the ground, especially our budgetary expectations of $75 oil price, we know that the average has been $68. Exchange rate of 1,400, we know that we've balanced out at 1,500. All indications do point to the fact that it's going to be difficult for us to match, to meet our obligations for both 2024 and 2025 by the end of this year.
Okay, to throw in a bit more information there that is useful. So when you look at the report, it also says that our non-oil tax has grown to over 40%, or has increased to over 40%, compared to, to over 10 trillion naira, compared to just over 7 trillion, in 2024. So we are getting in more money from the agencies that are revenue collecting, and of course taxation. And I think it will even get worse by next year, or get better, depending. So there's more taxation, there's more money coming in. So everyone get ready. Belt tightening measures. Okay. Let's see Daily Sun before we quickly run to the international. Here, FG Mall sales of airports, refineries, Ajokuta Steel, 89 other enterprises too. ADC accuses president of running government like exclusive club. And there's that story on visa. US explains visa cancellation for Nigerians. Others, even the United Kingdom is saying when your visa expires, you have to leave. Don't wait for it to expire while you're still in that country. Okay, international headlines. The Citizen newspaper. Cyril praises Zim land grabs. DA slams President Cyril Ramaphosa for endorsing Mugabe's failed land confiscation. Ramaphosa had said the ambitious reforms mirror South Africa's experience. I mean, Yolanda, indeed, Zimbabwe's experience and parts of its history does reflect South Africa's ongoing struggles as far as land ownership and historical injustices are concerned, doesn't it?
I actually beg to differ. I think the two are very different. They look similar, but they're definitely not the same. I know
when
that
it comes to land.
Yes, when it comes to the opinion of the land grabbing that has been expressed in this report, a lot of people and their families fell prey to this tragic incident that happened in the early 2000s. So many people were, agriculture was disrupted, unemployment was on the rise. There were so many disruptions in the economy at that time to so many families. So to say that the two are similar with what is going on in South Africa is just very, very different. I understand the sentiment.
What he means is that in terms of black majority, in terms of ownership of land, the white people are minority, but they still own majority of the land. That's what he's trying to say.
I understand that. I understand that. But I'm speaking more from a point of the implications. The implications that had on the economy, on the society, on the country as a whole is what should be considered as well.
So that's land redistribution.
Yes. On the face of it, yes, it looks right. Taking back your land, reclaiming that, but at what cost? That is the point that I'm trying to bring out.
So was it land distribution or was it sanctions? Because remember,
it was sanctions because sanctions have still been on. Back. If I'm not mistaken, there are still sanctions on Zimbabwe from that time.
All right. Are you done, yes, Zimbabwe? Because I know it's your country. You're Absolutely. From Zimbabwe, so.
It's my country too.
Yeah, it's your country too. Okay, so both of you might have a little bit of, but the point remains that you might not like the method, but the point remains that there are historical injustices that need to be addressed. So the way it's addressed is now the contention and how that affects people's lives. Okay, let's move on to another story. There's a big focus on China's military parade in Beijing. It's the largest in the history of that country. They were doing that to commemorate the end of World War II. And at that parade, the latest weapons were unveiled. The President Xi hosted Putin and Kim. That's a trial that the West doesn't want to see at all. But anyway, the latest missiles, fighter jets, other military hardware was showcased. I mean, there is no doubt that this is a projection of power. You know, has any of you been to China?
Yes.
Have you been to China?
Yeah.
Has anybody been to China?
I'm sure some of us have been to China. But I think very importantly here, what we're seeing is shifting geopolitics in the Trump era. And I hate to call it the Trump era because obviously he is also trying to make it about himself or America. But as the world shifts, we're seeing very important partnerships that are not West focused. Even in Nigeria, we've seen the BASA agreement with Brazil. We've seen the vice president of Colombia coming to Nigeria. We've seen Dangote building a plant in Ethiopia. We're seeing even the Africa Free Trade Agreement, right? We're seeing a shift in geopolitics. We're also seeing the rise of the middle powers with Qatar and the UAE. And essentially, people are leaving the West behind. Europe is struggling, right? And America has kind of not thrown them a lifeline as they usually would. And so when you're seeing Putin, you know, with Xi Jinping, with the head of North Korea, when you're seeing even countries in Eastern Europe having leadership represented, what we're seeing is a shift in geopolitics. A lot of times people see it as a East versus West, you know, issue, America versus China, or particularly in context of the Russia-Ukraine war. But what we're seeing now is that it is very important for the middle powers and for countries in the global south to make these key relationships and build on them.
Oh, okay. I mean, I have been to China, and I can tell you that, I mean, I think that country is unstoppable. When you look at the amount of investment in human capital, in agriculture, in technology, in everything, you know, in education, I mean, they mean business, and there's so much money that goes into industrialization as well, or industry. And so we know that China is like, you know, the factory of the world and produces almost everything and anything that you want. And they have the technology, the infrastructure. These are Chinese building those infrastructures and not foreigners. So, I mean, there's a lot. Yolanda briefly wanted to say something.
Yes, very briefly. Just to answer your question, I chuckled a little bit because I was thinking of the response from Donald Trump concerning this. I completely agree with what you've said, Dr. Constance. I myself as well, I've spent a few years in China, and the way that things are run there is impeccable. Even when the pedestrians have separate lanes for how they walk, people going in one direction have to have certain lanes and going in the opposite so as to, you know, avert things like stampedes and all of that. But, you know, the structure, and just as you see in that military parade, you see the, you know, the number of foot soldiers that are really there showing their power in numbers. Trump said on his Truth Social, and he was reacting, you know, to other leaders accusing them of conspiring against the United States. And I found that very interesting because Trump is meant to be, you know, the leader of the free world. And here he is now finding somebody he's actually meeting his match.
All right, let's go to the UK. A huge backlash against Sir Keir Starmer's government and the handling of a writer. Let's pull up Daily Mail, please. There, when did Britain become North Korea? That's a question. Writer Graham Linehan was arrested by armed officers over online comment about transgender comments or activists. Linehan, 57, was said to have been treated like a terrorist, detained for 12 hours, and then rushed to the hospital following the stressful encounter. I mean, Benga, a continuing debate about how our online activities could potentially spell trouble.
Well, we don't need to go too far. We don't need to look further. Just recently, we saw Simon Ekpa's issue, and where many people are crying that even back in Nigeria, that was just a slap in the wrist. He's facing challenges. Being a dual citizen of Finland and Nigeria, we can see that he has come under the heavy arm of the law, heavy knock of the law, for using his online activities to promote violent terrorism activities, alleged violent terrorism activities, and also aggravated tax fraud and violation of the Lawyers Act. So when you look at this incident, we could see the speedy implementation of the rule of law and democratic governance in Finland. And, the Nigerian government has also welcomed that they are also going to start their own exercise on its prosecution after the 6th year. But many people believe that the effect of its terrorism activities had a strong toll in the southeast, where he's calling for a separatist government. And all those are not really auguring well for the Nigerian citizens. So we can see clearly that there is a need to have a strong cyber law reform that would really checkmate all the activities. And just recently we saw that the Nigerian government have embarked on a cleanup of online irregularities in the cyberspace of the country.
I mean, we would have taken the Guardian, Financial Times, but we have to leave it there. Thank you so much, guys, for contributing to the discussion.